Imagine, if you will, a concept so vast, so incredibly unnatural to the human mind that just thinking about it can actually trigger a panic attack.
Oh, absolutely.
I want you to imagine living forever, and I don't just mean for a few hundred years or even a few million. I want you to imagine existing for infinity, eternity.
Just a timeline with absolutely no boundaries.
Exactly. Stretching out so far into the future that the concept of time itself just completely shatters. Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a wildly diverse stack of reading material to get through today.
Yeah, it's quite the mix.
I'm talking advanced cosmological physics papers, some incredibly dense philosophical essays, historical accounts, and even a completely fascinating Reddit thread where people are just having existential crises together.
My favorite kind of Reddit thread.
Right. So the mission of this deep dive is to navigate the mind-bending reality of forever. We are going to try to figure out if our universe actually has a definitive beginning or if it just loops eternally.
And we really have to look at both the physics and the psychology of that.
Yes, because along the way, we're going to explore how the human mind violently grapples with the crushing weight of unending time. And joining me to help translate these massive, highly abstract concepts into something we can actually wrap our heads around is our resident expert.
It is great to be here. We definitely have a massive amount of ground to cover today.
We really do.
I'm really looking forward to connecting the dots between the cold, hard physics of our expanding cosmos and the deeply personal, sometimes terrifying psychological ways that you and I actually experience the passage of time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when we talk about eternity, a lot of people reflexively think of it as a gift.
The holy grail of human existence.
Right, fountain of youth. But while digging into the psychology literature, I learned there is a literal, documented medical fear of infinity and eternity.
A pyrophobia.
Yes, a paraphobia. And if you suffer from it, the thought of endlessness doesn't sound like a gift at all. It causes intense discomfort, severe panic attacks, and this terrifying feeling of derealization.
Where your immediate reality starts to feel distorted.
Like you're trapped in a dream. The research notes that this phobia almost always kicks off in adolescence. It's closely tied to the natophobia, which is the fear of death, but it's really about the existential dread of either an eternal afterlife or an eternal blank oblivion.
What's truly fascinating here is the psychological mechanism behind that fear. Like, why does it hit us specifically when we're teenagers?
I was wondering that myself.
Well, there's a brilliant hypothesis on this from Martin Wiener, a neuroscientist and psychologist. He suggests that as teenagers develop the cognitive capacity for long-term planning, which, is a huge developmental milestone,
right,
they suddenly realize that this brand new mental tool is completely and utterly useless in the face of an infinite stretch of time.
Wow.
You simply cannot plan for eternity. It essentially crashes the brain's prediction software.
That makes so much sense. I remember being like 14, staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, just thinking about the universe going on forever and feeling physically dizzy.
Exactly. It's an overload. It's like your brain is trying to calculate a math problem that has no solution.
Yeah.
To illustrate this specific type of existential dread, Blaise Pascal, the 17th century philosopher, wrote something incredibly profound.
What did he say?
He described the sheer terror of considering the remarkably short duration of a human life when you realize it is, in his words, swallowed up in the eternity before and after.
Swallowed up. That's a heavy phrase.
He wrote about feeling completely engulfed in an infinite immensity of spaces, terrified by the realization that there is absolutely no fundamental reason why we exist here rather than there, or right now rather than a billion years ago.
It is incredibly bleak when you frame it like that. And this fear actually bleeds perfectly into a huge philosophical debate I was reading about regarding the sheer tedium of immortality.
Ah, yes. The Bernard Williams argument.
Right. Williams analyzes a famous play about a woman named Alina Macropoulos. So Alina is basically immortal, and she's offered a second dose of an elixir that will give her another 300 years of life.
And she refuses it.
She just throws it away. She declines it because her life has become unbearably boring and alienating. She has simply run out of projects, relationships, and interests.
She's done it all.
Exactly. Williams uses her story to argue that an immortal life is necessarily boring. For creatures like us, who derive our entire sense of meaning from our goals, desires, and projects, an eternity would eventually drain every ounce of meaning from existence.
It's a very compelling, intuitive argument.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all had days where we're bored out of our minds, so imagine that stretching forever. But the philosopher John Martin Fisher actually wrote an essay responding to this.
The immortality curmudgeon essay, right?
Yes. He pushes back against what he calls the immortality curmudgeon view. Fisher synthesizes arguments from thinkers like Thomas Nagel. Nagel famously said that if he were given the choice to live one more week, he would gladly choose that extra week, every single week, forever.
So he would essentially choose eternity piecemeal.
Right. And Fisher builds on this by suggesting that we don't necessarily run out of projects. We can just rotate our crops.
Rotate our crops, like alternating what we care about.
Precisely. So you study astrophysics for a few decades. Then you get bored of that, so you focus on painting for a century.
Okay.
Then you retreat into nature, and maybe 1,000 years later, you return to astrophysics completely refreshed. But Fisher offers an even more relatable analogy that I just love.
Let's hear it.
Think about being on a very long, terribly boring transatlantic flight in economy class.
Oh, the worst.
You are completely miserable. You are reduced to doing a half-finished crossword puzzle in a crumpled 10-year-old in-flight magazine just to pass the time.
I have been on that exact flight. It is soul-crushing.
Right. But here is the kicker. Even though your life in that specific moment is completely devoid of grand, meaningful projects and you are agonizingly bored, you would still unequivocally choose to finish that crossword puzzle over the plane suddenly exploding midair.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Fisher's point is that a meaningless, bored life can still be deeply preferable to absolute death.
That is such a great way to put it. I would definitely take the terrible airplane crossword over the plane exploding.
Most people would.
But, we've been talking about this flight as if it eventually lands.
Right.
We are treating eternity as a straight line.
Right. Linear time.
Let's shift the paradigm for a second. What if the flight never lands? What if time isn't a straight line at all, but a circle?
Then now we're getting into the really heavy stuff.
This brings us to Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence. In his book, The Gay Science, Nietzsche poses this wild, haunting thought experiment.
The demon.
Yes, the demon. He says, imagine that a demon visits you in your loneliest loneliness. And this demon tells you that you will have to live your exact life over and over again for all of eternity.
Every single detail.
Every pain, every joy, every sigh, every unutterably small or great thing in your life will return to you in the exact same sequence. The eternal hourglass of existence will be turned over again and again, and you with it.
It's a remarkably heavy proposition.
Yeah.
I mean, if that demon showed up tonight, how would you react?
I'd probably panic.
And that's really the point. Nietzsche wasn't necessarily making a strict scientific claim about astrophysics or the cosmos here.
Well.
He was offering a psychological litmus test.
Okay.
Do you throw yourself down, gnash your teeth, and curse the demon in absolute horror? Or do you call the demon a god because you have experienced a life so tremendous, or even just a single moment so beautiful, that you would welcome the infinite loop?
I was actually reading that fascinating Reddit thread where people were heavily debating this exact loop.
What was the consensus?
Well, some users pointed out something profound. Accepting this loop isn't about passive resignation. It's not just shrugging your shoulders. It is the ultimate way to affirm your life.
Oh, that's a great perspective.
It forces you to take absolute responsibility for your present choices. If you know you are choosing a fate you will have to live with for literally all eternity, it changes how you handle your morning commute, how you treat your partner, or how you view your past regrets.
The ultimate goal, as Nietzsche called it, is amor fati, the love of one's fate.
Amor fati. I love that.
Which is a beautiful, empowering way to live. But from a purely philosophical standpoint, it introduces a major structural problem. The philosopher Brandon Robshaw wrote a great piece pointing out a severe flaw with cyclic time. It utterly destroys the meaning of a narrative.
How so? Like, it ruins the story.
Think about the classic rags to riches story. It's triumphant and deeply meaningful, precisely because it has a definitive starting point and a definitive end point.
Right. You start poor, you end up rich.
You escape the rags, you achieve the riches. But if you are trapped in an endless loop, it's no longer a rags to riches story. It's just rags to riches, forever.
The triumph is completely erased because the finish line just becomes the starting line again. It completely ruins the plot of every good movie ever made.
It really does. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of human history, we see that this narrative problem has bothered thinkers for millennia. Nietzsche didn't invent the concept of eternal return.
It just popularized it.
Right. In Indian philosophy, you have ancient concepts like samsara and the kalpa, which is an endless, agonizing cycle of universal destruction and recreation. The ancient Greeks fiercely debated this too.
I remember reading about the Stoics in the sources.
Yes, the Pythagoreans and the Stoics strongly believed in a cosmic loop. The Stoics specifically taught that the universe undergoes something called ekpyrosis, which is the massive cosmic conflagration or fire destroying everything.
A literal cosmic reset button.
And that is immediately followed by palingenesis, a literal rebirth of the exact same universe down to the smallest detail.
So Nietzsche's demon was basically just a Stoic with better branding.
Pretty much. But this ancient idea faced massive pushback, particularly as Christianity spread. Augustine of Hippo strongly rejected the Stoic loop.
Because it messes with salvation, right?
His argument was very pragmatic. If you are doomed to return to your misery eternally, you can never truly be saved or blessed. For Augustine, cyclic time fundamentally denied human free will and the permanence of spiritual salvation. You can't have a final judgment if the universe just resets the next day.
Okay, so the philosophers and theologians have been arguing about this forever, but what if those ancient Stoics were actually onto something physically?
Now we transition to the cosmos.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the part of the reading that blew my mind. I started digging into the cosmology papers we gathered. We're looking at cyclic models and the concept of the Big Bounce.
The Big Bounce.
This is the astrophysical theory that the Big Bang wasn't actually the beginning of everything. It was just a phase transition. A previous universe collapsed in on itself in a big crunch, and the sheer force of that collapse bounced directly into our Big Bang.
It is a breathtakingly elegant idea. It entirely removes the messy problem of having a definitive start to time. But historically, it ran into a massive physics roadblock, discovered by Richard C. Tolman back in the 1930s.
The entropy problem.
It's known as the entropy problem, yes.
Right, entropy. The universe's tendency toward disorder.
Exactly. The second law of thermodynamics dictates that entropy or disorder always increases in a closed system. Think of a teenager's bedroom. Without constantly putting energy in to clean it, it naturally gets messier over time. It never spontaneously cleans itself.
So true.
So if the universe is bouncing, the physical mess, or entropy, from the previous universe carries over to the next one.
Because it doesn't just disappear.
Right. Because of this built-up entropy, each successive cycle of the universe would have to get longer and expand larger than the last. Now, play that in reverse. If you extrapolate backward in time, the cycles get shorter and smaller until you inevitably trace back to a definitive, singular beginning where entropy was zero. For decades, entropy seemed to absolutely kill the eternal bounce theory.
But physics obviously didn't stop in the 1930s. I was reading through some incredibly creative modern workarounds to Tolman's entropy roadblock. For example, there's the Steinhardt-Turok model.
Oh, the brain cosmology.
Yeah, it says here this model uses string theory, suggesting our universe is a four-dimensional brain colliding periodically with a parallel brain, which sounds completely like something out of a sci-fi novel. How does that actually solve the messy room problem?
It sounds wild, I know. To understand it, think of a brain, which is just short for membrane, like a single slice of bread in a much larger cosmic loaf.
A slice of bread. Got it.
String theory suggests our entire 3D universe is just one of these slices, floating in a higher dimensional space. And occasionally, our slice smacks into the parallel slice right next to it.
And that's the bang.
That collision creates the massive burst of energy we call the Big Bang. And to solve the entropy problem, Steinhardt and Turok propose that the universe experiences a net expansion during each cycle.
So it gets bigger.
Because space gets so unimaginably, exponentially huge, the density of the entropy drops to practically zero. It's like taking a handful of dirt and throwing it into the Pacific Ocean. The dirt is still there, but it's so diluted it essentially doesn't matter, preventing the mess from building up between cosmic collisions.
That makes sense. Dilution is the solution to pollution, even on a cosmic scale.
Exactly.
There was another one mentioned, the Baum-Frampton model, which uses something called phantom energy. It says that right before the universe rips itself apart in a big rip, it basically comes back empty.
What is phantom energy?
Phantom energy is a theoretical form of dark energy that accelerates the expansion of the universe so violently that it eventually tears apart galaxies, stars, planets, and even atoms themselves.
That sounds terrifying.
That's the big rip. In the Baum-Frampton model, the universe expands so rapidly that the observable universe effectively empties out. It turns around with virtually zero entropy and no matter left to collapse into black holes, effectively resetting the cosmic clock for a new cycle.
It's just wild to me that we can even mathematically model this stuff. I also read about the renowned physicist Roger Penrose. He proposed something called conformal cyclic cosmology.
A brilliant mind. In his model, the universe expands for so incredibly long that eventually, every single particle of matter decays into light. When the universe is nothing but massless photons flying through the void, the very physical concepts of time and distance actually lose all meaning.
Because without mass, time doesn't really exist in the same way.
The universe essentially forgets how big it is. And mathematically, an infinitely large, empty universe full of light is identical to the infinitely dense, hot singularity of a brand new Big Bang.
Penrose's theory is a masterpiece of mathematical imagination. There is also loop quantum cosmology, which attempts to finally marry quantum mechanics and general relativity.
How does that one work?
It suggests that as a previous universe collapses, the quantum effects of gravity, which usually pull things together, eventually become strongly repulsive at a microscopic scale. This prevents the universe from collapsing into an infinitely dense point, or a singularity, causing it to rebound outward in a Big Bang.
So it naturally bounces on a quantum level.
Exactly. However, as fascinating as all of these are, we have to look at them objectively. The literature makes it clear that these models remain entirely theoretical.
They're just math at this point.
In fact, just a few years ago, a 2023 study used massive amounts of data from the Planck satellite to specifically hunt for the microscopic signatures of a bounce in the cosmic microwave background radiation, the leftover heat from the Big Bang.
And what did they find?
They failed to find them. The evidence for a bouncing universe just isn't there yet.
Which brings us to the ultimate roadblock. I was reading this paper by physicists Arvind Borde, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin regarding what's called the BGV theorem.
The BGV theorem, yes.
And I will be honest, the math is completely staggering, but the conclusion seems to put up a massive, impenetrable brick wall in the past. What exactly is this theorem proving?
In plain English, the BGV theorem states that any universe that is, on average, expanding throughout its history must have a past space-time boundary.
A definitive start.
It simply cannot be past eternal. It demands a beginning.
But why? Why is an eternally expanding universe physically impossible?
Alexander Vilenkin provides a brilliant, highly intuitive analogy for this. He asks you to imagine a space traveler moving through an expanding universe. The traveler is just coasting by inertia, engines completely off.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
As the traveler passes different galaxies, observers on those galaxies pull out their radar guns and measure the traveler's speed. Because the universe is expanding, those galaxies are all flying apart from one another. This means the traveler's speed relative to each successive galaxy gets smaller and smaller as they move forward in time.
Right, because the gaps are getting wider.
Now, take that movie and play it in reverse. If you follow the space traveler's history backward into the deep past, their relative speed gets larger and larger.
Please speed up.
Eventually, at some finite point in the past, the traveler's speed hits the speed of light. That is a hard, unbreakable physical limit in our universe. You simply cannot extrapolate their journey back infinitely. At some point, the traveler and the universe itself must have started.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just a philosophical preference. It is baked into the physics of movement.
Exactly.
And I read an essay from Kirk Durston that outlines how this is also just basic mathematics. Durston explains that actual physical history unfolds one single second at a time. He makes a vital distinction between a potential infinity-like, when you count numbers upwards, 1, 2, 3, forever, without ever actually reaching an end, and a completed infinity.
Which is a static, single object, not a sequence.
Right. You cannot physically count down to the present moment starting from negative infinity. It's like trying to jump out of a bottomless pit. You can never take the final step out because you'd have to take an infinite number of steps before it.
It's a logical impossibility.
Because an infinite sequence of events can never be completed by adding one step at a time. The past simply must be finite.
Precisely. And looking at the sheer weight of the BGV theorem and the math of infinity, Vilenkin himself reached a stark conclusion. He is quoted stating very plainly, "All the evidence we have says that the universe had a beginning."
It is fascinating how one single mathematical theorem creates an absolute fork in the road for human philosophy. When I was looking at how different thinkers react to the BGV theorem, the interpretations couldn't be more polarized.
It's a massive dividing line.
On one hand, you have theologians and philosophers like William Lane Craig. Craig looks at this physical boundary and argues it is direct scientific backing for the cosmological argument. He argues that if the universe definitively began to exist, if time and space had a starting line, it must have a transcendent cause outside of time and space, which he attributes to a creator.
And on the flip side of that exact same mathematical coin, you have physicists like Vilenkin looking at the BGV theorem and arguing that the necessity of a beginning implies something entirely different.
Right.
Vilenkin argues that the laws of quantum mechanics allow a closed universe to essentially pop into existence from literally nothing, entirely uncaused.
Uncaused. How does something come from nothing without breaking the laws of physics?
He compares it to the random decay of a radioactive atom, which happens without a direct physical trigger. He argues this is mathematically possible because the positive energy of all the matter in the universe is perfectly canceled out by the negative energy of gravity.
So they balance out.
If you add them together, the math balances out to a universe with exactly zero total energy. Because the net energy is zero, no conservation laws are broken if the universe spontaneously appears out of nowhere.
That is just wild.
You have two vastly different worldviews. One pointing to a transcendent creator, the other to the bizarre, uncaused spontaneity of quantum mechanics, both rooted in the exact same mathematical proof that time had a beginning.
So what does this all mean for you? We have gone from the deepest fears of the teenage brain grappling with eternity at 2 a.m. to the philosophical dread of an unending airplane flight. We've explored the cosmic mechanics of colliding higher dimensional bread slices and finally hit the hard mathematical boundary of time itself.
It's been a journey.
Whether time is a single finite line that spontaneously popped out of nowhere or was intentionally spoken into existence, or whether it's an endless bouncing loop of cosmic fire and rebirth, our relationship with time is ultimately what matters.
Absolutely.
Our understanding of the sheer crushing weight of eternity is exactly what gives our present fleeting moments their profound, sharp meaning. The fact that the crossword puzzle eventually ends is what makes it worth doing.
It is, and yet I want to leave you with one final, totally mind-bending concept to ponder on your own tonight, drawn from the deepest corners of the physics literature we reviewed.
Oh boy.
We talked earlier about Nietzsche's demon. We treated it as a metaphor, a psychological test of your resilience. But what if it isn't a metaphor at all? In thermodynamics, there is a strict mathematical principle called the Poincaré recurrence theorem.
Okay, lay it on me.
It states that in any sealed dynamical system, imagine a bunch of gas particles just bouncing around randomly inside a perfectly sealed box. Those particles will eventually, given enough time, return to a state arbitrarily close to their exact original starting position.
They just bounce back to where they started.
They have to. The combinations are massive but finite. If our universe operates like that sealed box, bounded by certain finite physical parameters and energy states, then every single configuration of matter must eventually repeat itself.
Wait a minute.
The philosopher Michael Huemer suggests that if this theorem holds true for the cosmos, we can actually use Bayesian probability, which is just the math of updating the odds of something based on the evidence you have right now, to view your current existence as mathematical proof that literal reincarnation is real.
Wait. Because I am alive right now, the math says I have to be alive again.
Exactly. If the universe lasts forever, the finite number of atoms that make up your brain, your memories, and the device you're using to listen to this right now will inevitably randomly reassemble in this exact order again.
My brain just short-circuited.
And again, forever. What if Nietzsche's demon isn't a poetic metaphor at all, but an inescapable thermodynamic certainty?
Now that is a thought to keep you up at night. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the universe.